Welcome to Philosoferica. I'm your host, Erica, and today's topic is creativity and writing. So, we are going to talk about the creative cure, what the creative cure is, and how to find it. And today's guest is writer and creative guide Jacob Nordby. Hello, Jacob, and thank you so much for joining this podcast. Welcome to the show.
I'm so glad to be here, Erica. And I've, known you on social media for a long time, so it's fun to meet this way and meet the people who listen to you.
Yeah, and as you know, I have also joined your program Heal Plus Create. So we've seen each other on the screens, but we never actually talked in this way. So I'm so happy to finally connect with you and hear about your projects. So, Jacob, you are the co-founder of a writing room collective called Heal Plus
Mhm.
Create, where I joined a couple of years ago, and also the co-founder of Institute for Creative Living and the author of several books, including Blessed Are the Weird and The Creative Cure. And today we're going to talk about mostly the content of your book, The Creative Cure. And you also work as an author and creative guide. However, I think it's important to show the listeners and the followers that it's not always a smooth ride, an easy ride, and it hasn't always been like this for you. Because before you started as a writer and doing what you do today, you worked as a CEO in your own company and as a marketing director for a publishing house. And if that's okay with you, let's go back to that time of your life because, as I said, it's I think it's important to show the listeners that when they look at you today, they're like, oh, you're so successful and you're making it as a writer and you have all these courses and you're doing this and that, but it hasn't always been this smooth ride.
No.
And you describe in the book, The Creative Cure, that you had when you were 34, you start opening the book by describing how your life was, that you had it all, it seemed, a nice house, great job, money, family. And it seemed perfect on the outside. And then you say on the inside, you felt hollow, confusion, and dread.
Mhm.
And then you started to change your life little by little and started to coming back to your childhood dream of becoming a writer. So, Jacob, can you tell us about this time in your life and how you finally uh, came back to where you are today?
Yeah, thank you. It's funny. I feel like it was in one of Hemingway's books that one of the characters said, "Well, how did he go bankrupt?" And they said, "Well, slowly at first and then suddenly, or slowly at first and then all at once." Um, you said you little by little changed your life. It felt very dramatic at the time, Erica. Yeah, no, it was interesting. I mean, you framed it up well. I really did. Age 34, I had a lot of titles to my name, and started this and was the CEO of that, and had a large office that we had custom designed and had built, and it was beautiful. It was pride and joy. And so there was so much that on the exterior was great, and I wondered if this is what have always hoped for, then why am I not happy? Why am I not only am I not happy, why am I terrified all the time? Um, and it was interesting. I read about that time. These were the bellwethers leading up to it, Erica. So in 2006, one of my mentors uh, told me to read Tim Ferriss's book, The 4 Hour Work Week. And I read that, and it was a spiritual wake-up call because he was talking about in that book, even though he was talking about, organizing more of a lifestyle business and all this, he was also asking big questions like, are you just waiting until you can buy your own freedom? And I felt like someone hit me in the forehead with a brick because that's exactly what I was doing. because I had always had that dream, Erica, to be a writer. At age 10, I came out in the living room and told my parents, this is what I want to do. And previous to that, I wanted to be a spy or wanted to be a fireman or something. But this was the first time when I said it, I could feel it. It's like, yes, that's what I really want to do. Um, to their credit, my parents were very supportive. They said, "That's wonderful. We know you can do that." And then they said, "Okay, now it's time to brush your teeth and go to bed." And so I brushed my teeth and went to bed and pretty much forgot that dream for the next 20 some years, Erica. I mean, I didn't forget it. It was always in there, but I always felt like, well, I'll have to wait until the day when I have plenty of money or I can, pursue this. And what I have come to realize is that one of the reasons I felt so terrified at age 34 was not that any of those things is wrong, the big, beautiful house or the office or anything, but my motivation for creating them was based on fear, Eric. It was based on fear of scarcity. I grew up with a lot of poverty and there was a lot of trauma in my developmental years. And so there was so much fear involved with what I had created. And what I've learned is if I'm creating something out of fear and not aligned with who I really am and aligned with, this is what I would love to create and see more of in the world and in my life, what I create out of fear and trauma response is never going to feel satisfying or solid.
Mm. So what? So okay, you had that realization. You read the book. So what happened? Like I think you said somewhere that you decided to change your life. Like got a divorce, and then you started to build your life little by little. Like, can you explain how?
Well, yeah, so like a year later, again, this itch was there, Erica. It's like what I don't feel like I can change my life. I had all of these positions and titles and
Mm,
debts and obligations built up. So I felt very much trapped inside of this, what appeared to be a successful life. And so a year later, a young man came and worked for me, and suggested I go to a meditation retreat with him. Well, it turned out I said yes, because that seemed like a good idea to learn how to meditate. And when I got there, it turned out to be a shamanic initiation. They were administering DMT, a particularly potent version of DMT, actually. And so there was that moment of clarity that, looking back at it now, what I've learned about that experience was it was a chemically induced near-death experience. And much like people who've experienced near-death experiences, um, there's often a sense of clarity or of gaining perspective on one's life. And that's definitely what happened to me during that moment. It was just like, okay, this vague itch that, is getting more apparent as reading Tim Ferriss's book. And then here in this experience, it just was this radical clarity, Erica, of like, okay, the sense of freedom, sense of safety, sense of creative inspiration that I really long for in my life, is being stifled by this life that I've built that is not in alignment with those things. And so I went back to that life, not at all knowing how to fix that or realign. And the mortgage meltdown in 2008 came along a year later and wiped me out and really took that decision out of my hands. And so there it was, and I watched it happen. I had a front row seat. I was one of the participants and watched my life crumble all at once, what it felt like all at once. And so then I didn't really know what to do next at all. People would come and say, "Oh, you're so brave. You're breaking out. You're figuring out a different path." I'm like, I don't feel brave at all. I'm just trying to figure out the next step. So my then wife and three little kids, we decided to move to Austin, Texas, and we didn't know anybody there, but it just felt like the right place to make a new start and to get to be able to be anonymous. Nobody knew me there, and it was be a chance to kind of take a deep breath and take stock. So that's what happened. I worked two or three part-time jobs. I worked in a cigar lounge. And I worked in this government office where I was in a warehouse and would carry boxes back and forth in a warehouse to the main office. And it was there at that office, Eric, that I had the chance to start doing the Artist Way, Julia Cameron's program. And that's where I began to write for the first time, really, in my adult life. And so at age 35, I felt like I had a chance to begin reclaiming that old dream. And I wrote most of my first book there, The Divine Arsonist, in between box orders as I was waiting for those to come in Austin. And then, a series of just beautiful synchronicities, miracles, whatever you want to call them, arrived in my life. And, during that time, Eric, I really learned how to meditate. I did a lot of healing in that warehouse in between box orders, learned how to journal, learned how to meditate, um, really did a lot of inner work. And so along the way, though, I met Randy Davila, who owns Hierophant Publishing and Inside Events, and he started asking me to participate with some of his events with people like Dr. Fred Allen Wolf or Byron Katie, some of these amazing folks, Don Miguel Ruiz. And then about a year or two later, he asked me to join his company as a marketing director. And from the previous chaos that had really shattered everything for me, I really didn't know if I'd ever have access to those tools, the things that I knew about business before, Erica. So it's been really so gratifying to learn that um, if we're going through major transitions and it looks like all is lost and our entire life has been a waste up to this point, to just know that it hasn't been a waste and that we've learned things and we've picked up skills, and that as we are being rearranged in the shape that is more aligned with who we really are, those things will come back in a better sense, in a better way. That's been my experience anyway.
Hmm.
I feel like I've been talking a long time with no break, so please take over.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that story. And I was thinking when you said that the financial crisis hit in 2008, that must have
hmm
been really scary for you that everything was breaking apart. But is it, when you look back at it now, do you see it as a kind of blessing or help to get you out of that situation and into the new situation?
No question. No question. No, I sometimes I felt so honest, and this is true. Honestly, I felt selfish at the time, Erica, because I realized that what for me was forcing a play and taking decisions out of my hands that I just wasn't equipped to make, was
Mm.
also causing a lot of other people a lot of distress. And of course, it wasn't like it was my fault that it happened, but I certainly felt badly that I was feeling so, liberated in the middle of also feeling really torn apart. So yeah, it was such a mixed bag,
Mm.
but without any question, now I look back and say, I wouldn't change any of it, honestly, for myself.
Yeah, I can imagine when you were also working at this cigar store or taking these odd jobs and, like just
Yeah.
starting to write and starting to feel that creativity again, that you must have felt some doubt in that period. I know for myself, the last couple of years, like I've also been working these odd jobs and trying to create an identity for myself as a writer and starting my online business. And, in the beginning, it's really, I can hear the doubts and the fears. They're so loud, and I can imagine it must have been that way for you as well, the first couple of years until it got more stabilized.
I mean, I would say what's funny is, Erica, I still deal with doubts and fears, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing too, especially for those of us who get into a thing like writing. It just seems like, well, if once the book is published, then I'll have the doubts and fears kind of taken care of. And I mean, Anne Lamott says it so well, like the day of your publication comes and no trumpets get blown in your honor. So, and actually, I'm glad you brought that up though, because as much as I want to be able to say, oh yeah, once there's a certain line that once you cross that line, all your troubles are over. You feel like you're completely solid. But one thing I'll say, Erica, is that the way I see creativity, and I see it as our essential energy, our spark of life, whatever we call that, the inner self, the creative inner self, the soul, whatever we call it. I see it as our spark of life, and it's the same spark of life, that energy, that keeps galaxies turning. It keeps our hearts beating thousands of times a day. So for me, creativity is this formless, like really essential, vital spark, and by honoring it, I get to stay alive inside of my life. And I think that as we hit 30, 40, 50 and beyond, it can be harder and harder to stay alive inside of life because of the way our brains become habituated. We feel like we've seen everything, you know. And so part of the experience of a truly creative life, Erica, is um, remembering that creativity happens in environments of uncertainty. Like once we're absolutely certain of the outcome, it means we've probably already done it a few times. And so if I'm staying truly creatively alive, I'm likely to experience uncertainty and the anxiety that comes up with uncertainty in at least one or more domain of my life. And that doesn't mean that it has to be a distressing experience, but just to become more comfortable with that experience of uncertainty, which often our nervous systems interpret as anxiety, like, okay, something bad is about to happen. So just learning that if I'm staying truly creatively alive and stepping across that line of what I've done before into things I haven't done before, um, that sense of uncertainty, I think we have to become better friends with it, so that we stay creatively alive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I was hoping that you would say, no, 10 years later, it's going to be much easier now that you've published three, four books. It's going to be because I just, what you said about the trumpets, and I just published my second book. I self-published this time. And
Mm.
well, I put it on Facebook and I got some comments, some feedback, and then it just went quiet. I was like, was that it?
What's the name of your second book, Erica?
It's also in Norwegian. It's a children's book. It's called
Oh,
Pipion and the Fantastic Fantasy or something like that. The Fantastic Creativity.
oh,
Yeah.
wonderful. Okay.
Yeah. So let's go back to that time when you were like transforming. I'm really I feel like I'm a little bit in that kind of place myself. So that's why I'm so curious about this time. So you said that um returning to your creative nature was the master key to the transformation, and that
Mhm,
creativity saved your life.
mhm,
So can you explain this a little bit more detail, and how for others as well that feel that they are in this kind of transformation, how creativity can be a key for them as well?
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and I just want to say something too, not to take away from what I feel like I said that was true earlier about the sense of uncertainty, but I think that there comes a greater sense of trust in our own creative nature, Erica, in that in venturing out beyond some of these traditional forms or things that have kept us safe or certain in the past. 5, 10 years in, yes, if you're still leaning across that edge and doing new things, there still is the uncertainty, but also there comes an odd, it's like greater certainty inside of that. So I feel it's almost as if we eventually learn that we are the captains of our own ship. And so we don't feel as uncertain about when when really kind of along for the ride and it's somebody else's ride, then it matters a lot if the weather is stormy and if they know how to run the ship. But as we take our place at the helm of our own lives, creatively speaking, I just feel like we gain greater confidence that we know how to sail our ship, you know?
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So I wanted to give that, and so there's not this sense of like, well, why would anyone put themselves through a lifelong experience of terror?
Yeah.
The fact is, no, it does get better. It does get more sense of more being solid and all that. But going back to the transformation part, what did you ask me about that period?
You say you write in the book that creativity saved your life, and I thought that was a wow,
Oh,
that's a big statement, and I got really curious about how creativity can be a master key to the
mhm.
transformation. Mm.
Well, let's start with the save your life part. So for me, I had always been the most positive person in the room. And in my young life, I was the oldest of six kids, Erica, and so my role in the family was definitely kind of protector, caregiver and so it was important for me to project this sense of confidence and positivity, even if that's not what I was feeling. And I think there is some good leadership skill in that, in learning that you can kind of hold a certain attitude as needed. But when positivity is holding back genuine fear and unresolved trauma, and keeping that sort of blocked off, that's definitely how I was using positivity. And so when I had to let go of all that, when I was overwhelmed by the realities of life that took my house and my credit and my money and all the things away that had formed the framework of my life. For the first time in my life, Erica, I had to face the fact that I was experiencing depression, and I didn't even know what to call it at first. That's how much in denial of that experience I was. And so, going through that, you know, I learned what it is to experience mental illness. You know, I learned what it is to not feel like you can get out of bed in the morning, and that if you swing your feet over the edge of your bed, that there's this abyss and you might fall into it and never stop falling. And so I dealt with suicidal, moments. And um, I share this right now mainly because you probed, and I appreciate that, but also because I want anyone to know who's struggling with some of those things. Um, keep going.
Mm,
Keep going. It's not whatever your mind is convincing you of right now as the bleakest, the hardest, the most never-ending suffering. It's not true. That's not the whole truth, right? Um, yeah, I think the Rainier Rilke poem that I don't have near me, so I won't try to quote it, but he basically talks about, no feeling is final. No feeling is final. Just keep going. Um, in doing the work of the artist's way, that was some of the first work I started doing there. Um, I began to unburden, and I began to have a tool for unburdening, the morning pages, and that was where I poured out this pain and this like anger and confusion, like what just happened. And the artist states, I was so broke, I had no money, but the artist states, and she gave suggestions in there, and so I would find these experiences that didn't require any money. I found this beautiful botanical garden, and I just spent hours walking through it one day in Austin. I remember that one in particular as one of my early artist dates, and I was in enchantment. And so I had these moments that I would bring into my days, Erica, through these journaling experiences or an artist date walking through this beautiful garden. And I began to look for them. And so those were these moments of sanity and relief. And those moments of sanity and relief gave me a little bit more of what I needed to get through that day. And so I began to look forward to those things. And then as I had enough courage to start writing my own book, I began to look forward to that. And so that was this little like thread of hope that I could hold on to get through an otherwise scary, dark, depressing day. Yeah, and so I felt like a little bit at a time. I also began to learn who I was beneath the layers of those survival strategies and coping techniques that I had developed down through my life to deal with unresolved trauma, how we do. Little by little, I began to discover this creature underneath there.
mm. So you found hope.
And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and that's that self-discovery. And that's Eric, I talk about it in The Creative Cure, and it's also something I'm working on for a new book. But there's this pattern I've been able to observe, and it's we have to discover who we are, and we have to go back to our original self before we learned from society, and we began to distort and contort ourselves through trauma. Um, Before that, there was this creature, and this creature was tremendously innocent, and this creature is incredibly intelligent and magical and creative. All those words are different words for creativity. And so as we go back and find out who that creature was, and we reclaim the connection to it, that's why I call it such a master key to transformation. Because as I see it, Transformation is this process of discovery. I remember who I really am. I discover that creature again. As
Mm.
I do that, I begin to accept that creature. So there's self-discovery, then there's this self-acceptance that emerges like, oh, not only am I not broken, not only am I not this flawed little neurotic knot of misery, underneath all that, there's this tender creature, there's this alive creature, there's this hopeful creature, there's this creature that knows how to create something today that's
Mm.
beautiful, that's worthy, you know? And those things then, in fact, what I just said, create something that's beautiful, that's worthy. That's that self-expression. That is a natural result from the first two. So the discovery that leads to acceptance, that also leads to expression. And I mean, even the word expression, in one sense, it is to breathe. You know, we express, it's breathing. And so as I see it, what we often call creativity is as natural as breathing for our inner creative self as we discover who that is and then accept it more deeply and then just begin to breathe.
Mm. It's so beautiful. There are several things coming to my mind when you speak, and one of them is, I think you write it on the back of your book, everyone is creative. And like you, one of the things I hear most of the times is, "Oh, I'm not that creative. It's just not for me." And people are, because I also did the artist way, like I did the course, I think 10 or 12 times, and before
Mm.
that I wasn't that creative either. I was quite creative when I was a kid, and then it kind of fell away a little bit. But
Yeah.
then starting to do the artist way, it slowly came back. And I've created so many different things over the years through that course. People are telling me, "Oh, you're so creative." And
Right.
as you, I say to them, "But you're also creative, you know." And I just give them the artist way and try this. Um, in your opinion, you say everyone is creative. And so what is your answer when people say, I'm not that creative? What, like, how do we convince people that they are creative too?
What I like to do is it's kind of like the word God, Erica, or love, you know. For me, creativity is one of those words that it has developed meanings that may or may not have any bearing on what the word actually is, you know. Like gratitude. I did a gratitude project at one point and asked people just honestly, how connected are you to the word gratitude? And they said, well, honestly, I feel guilty if I'm not being grateful, but I don't know if I feel that grateful. And so we're like, well, okay, what's the feeling of something when it's something really good happens that you didn't expect to have happen? It really good that happened. Um, what's that feeling? And they begin to express the feelings, that describe the feelings they have, you know, like, oh, I felt like I could breathe, my shoulders relaxed. I'm like, I just felt this joy and lightness. I'm like, okay, well, that's gratitude.
Mm,
That's what's underneath the word. And so I feel the same way about creativity. Like, actually, as I was writing this book, Eric, I was walking through my brother's office. He was the CEO of this company we had started back in the day, and it's a tech company. And he, was walking through, and I was so proud of, this team that he developed, all these senior developers, and these cubicles, and these men and women working in their offices, and then he was asking me about this book, and I was telling him a bit about it, and he stopped and he said that he's like, oh, I'm just not that creative, and I'm, that hit me. I'm like, well, I don't like the way that sounds. I don't feel like it's true. But we walked into his office, Eric, and he sat down, and there were three screens, computer screens, and it looked like the Matrix, all this code on it, And he sat down, and it was like watching a master pianist sit down at a grand piano and watch their posture change, watch her posture change. Like she instantly goes into a flow state as she enters her realm of expertise. I watched him do that, and he forgot I was there, and so he was, he was in his code, and I put my hand on his shoulder, and I said, brother, what I just watched to me looks like the equivalent of Mozart sitting down to compose a concerto or something, a symphony. And he looked at me, and I said, yeah, it's you think of creativity in my domain as writing or as art or as dancing or something, but what I just saw is You just came alive. You went into your flow state, whatever that is, whether it's cooking a meal, whether it's gardening, or taking care of children or creating a social event, whatever it is, to me, that is an expression of your creative self. And Erica, our creative selves want to express in so many different ways, not just the
Mm,
one way. It's the industrial era that has told us you have to specialize, you have to get good at one thing, and that's your thing. And really, the rest of it isn't all that legitimate unless you're making a lot of money on it. The truth is that your creative self is a child. Your creative self wants to make mud pies. It wants to finger paint on the walls. It wants to sing and dance, whether it's good at it or not, or whether it'll ever get paid for it. That is the creative self I'm talking about.
mm. And like you said earlier, that the system is not necessarily created to make us more creative. Like it's
Right.
created to for certainty that we get into a type of job and we make money. And
Yes.
well, the jobs I've had, they have not encouraged me specifically to be creative. It's more like I go there, I do my thing, and if I try to, um, come up with ideas, they're like, no, no, don't be that creative. Just
Yeah,
do
yeah,
what you're
yeah,
supposed
yeah.
to do. So, so the system is definitely keeping us from discovering ourselves,
Hmm.
like you say. And is it, in your opinion, do we have to like break out of the system, or what is the first? Can we have a job and also be creative? Like, how do we combine this? How do we create a more creative life while we still have to make money, right?
Well, yes, and I think it's so important to give ourselves a break because a lot of us want to become purists and go, well, it's either one thing or the other thing.
Mm,
It's either I work and experience a non-creative life and it just sucks every bit of life out of me, or I break from that and I go become a starving artist. And it's like you don't have to pick one or the other. In fact, highly suggest not picking one or the other.
mm,
Um, I think it's important to know there are times when we have to let go of the certainty and step forward into a life that we're not certain of. But I don't recommend that people just jump off a cliff and go, I'm going to become a writer and then I've never written anything. I don't have an audience yet, but I'm going to become a writer and that's how I'm going to pay my bills, because that often brings up too much terror. We go into fight or flight and then we're no longer even being creative. Now we're just flailing and we're terrified. And so I recommend a much more measured approach for a lot of people. And the other thing, Erica, is kind of like what I was just saying, like recapturing the simplicity and the smallness.
mm,
Um, it doesn't have to be this grand gesture. We don't have to wait. Like we look at an Anne Lamott or a Julia Cameron or someone and go, well, of course they know they're creative because they have New York Times bestsellers under their belt. Of course they must always feel creative. And the truth is they don't. I'm friends with both of them and we talk. And, Julia Cameron is endearingly um, hard on herself still after 50 some books she's written and universally loved. She totally believes that the next book will be garbage, unlike the other ones. And I love that because to me, there's this innocence about it. And it also reminds me that, like what you said, you did the program 10 or 12 times. That's amazing. Um,
yeah, I'm
amazing.
an extremist when it comes to those things. Like
Well,
now
no,
it's time to be creative. Let's go. Like I'm all in, 100%.
just
Yeah.
buckle in,
Yeah.
huh? How long did it take you to do the
Well, I
10 or
did
12
it
times?
once or twice a year.
Yeah,
So over a
amazing.
course of 5, 6 years, I did it like once or twice. And it was really cool because every time I did it, something new emerged. So let's say I did the course
Hmm.
one time and then I started to make kind of YouTube videos for fun. And the next time I started writing poems. And the next time, uh, you know, other things happened. So that was why I did it that many times because I was like, wow, there's so many things inside of me just waiting to be born. And I'm
Yeah.
so curious to see what's the next thing that's gonna come out of this course. I don't know why I stopped. Like maybe after like the 12th time, I felt, okay, now I don't have anything. Now it's just or I'm gonna take a break to do something else. Or so that was really, really cool. Yeah.
Are you still doing the morning pages?
I'm still doing the morning pages. I'm not so
Mhm.
good at the artist dates. I don't schedule them like every week. I'm not that strict about it, but I do take my
Mhm.
walks, I do meditation, and I go on like solo artist dates. I go by to the movies. It's kind of more
Yeah.
incorporated into my life naturally, I feel. Yeah.
I was going to say it sounds as if
Yeah.
you're living it. Well, and I mean, I think I'm really glad that you're telling your part of this right now because I could sit here and go on and on and on, but I loved what you said earlier about, that you knew that you were creative as a child, or it was just natural, effortless, as it is for us most of the time. And then you felt like you lost it. And what I love to say, Eric, is that you just described a creative recovery. And what I would love to suggest is that inner creative self was never lost, but your adult mind lost your connection to it. And so then you did the very difficult focused work recovering that connection, of restoring that connection. And that to me is what I'm talking about. It's like if people can understand, that child that did used to run around with its tummy out and sing and make pictures with its fingers and didn't wonder if it was good or bad at it. They just did it because it felt good. That creature still exists in there.
Mm,
Um, and it will, yes, yes, it will take. It's like so many other trauma responses or things that we have to heal from. It takes time to reverse the effects of a lifetime of walking away from those things, of dismissing ourselves and abandoning ourselves. But it is possible, and that's what I love. Is I love that it's possible, and your story is a
mm.
direct example of that. You did a full creative recovery, and that's beautiful.
Yeah, and my experience was a little bit similar to yours. I was 30 years old. And suddenly everything fell apart. Like my
Mm,
master's was done. I lost my job. My relationship was finished. I had nowhere to live. And then, in a kind of crisis like this, it's an opening. And then suddenly I just heard a voice that said, now you're going to write. And you're going to write like you did when you were a child. Not
amazing.
because I tried to write when I was like in my 20s. It wasn't the same because I didn't have a spiritual connection. I had lost contact with my intuition. So I tried to
Hmm.
write, but it was just really difficult. It wasn't any sparks. It was just
Yeah.
from the head.
Yep.
Yeah. And then in that crisis, something opened up, and
Mm,
suddenly I got a way in to start the recovery process and start to nonetheless get in touch with my spiritual side again, because I think that's was also was thing you were explaining, that you lost contact with yourself. And what does that mean? Contact with our spiritual self, I think.
exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, Eric, I think what you just described, and I love the way you're putting that. I just feel like all of this points to the fact that any idea that we have a self that is not spiritual or us, that is that is purely a notion because any step back in the direction of who we really are to me is a spiritual practice, whether that is a step back using dance, using writing, using gardening on my back porch, using meditation, whatever version it is, it's that discovery and rediscovery. Who am I? Wait a minute. Underneath all these layers, somewhere under there, who am I under all that? And any step we take in the direction of asking that question and finding out more about it, to me, that's a spiritual practice.
Mm. And I think it was so cool what you did in the Heal Plus Create membership. I remember we did like Tai Chi, and we did breathing exercises, and we did all these spiritual practices, and then
Yeah.
we did some writing. And I've always done these things separately, but then like during that course, it was just mind blowing to see, oh, it's actually like that was the moment I understood this is actually linked, and it's so important to have this spiritual connection to be able to write and create. And this is what Julia Cameron also writes in her book. Yeah.
Yes, amazing. No, I love that. And that's, I mean, really, Eric, I feel like you just kind of encapsulated what's going on with what we're talking about today, this entire conversation. I mean, really, it's worth it. It's worth it. And when I say it's worth it, a lot of times people go, okay, well, does that mean I'll have all this newfound certainty or confidence or be able to pay my bills next month? And the answer is no, not right away. Probably not. I don't want to make that kind of promise. But I will say that it's worth it because following that spark of aliveness leads to more being alive. And life knows a way through. That's what I know for sure. Life knows a way through. And so if I wake up today and feel just, and I did yesterday, just felt really, really low and not able to tackle even the smallest task, but I had a practice in place. So I went somewhere and I got my journal out and I sat down and I wrote through the questions, and I have this creative self-journaling program. I don't know if you want to drop that in the show notes, but it's called creativeselfjournal.com and it's a free program, Erica. And it's where I invite people to use the journaling practice. And there's three questions that I invite them to use every day. And this is especially good for people who don't think of themselves as journalers because it's simply asking and answering three questions. And these questions, each of them have the effect of helping us get grounded, of helping us get reconnected to our lives, to this present moment. How do I feel right now? What do I need right now? Asking those two questions and answering them for 3 or 4 minutes has a surprisingly grounding effect. It's a
Mm,
good mental health practice, right? And then, after we ask those things and acknowledge and address anything that's not feeling good right now or addressing unmet needs right now. Once I've addressed those, then I can shift into the more imaginative and what would I love or what would I love to create today. A different way I often ask that question is, how would I love to feel right now? Especially if I'm
mm,
going through emotional difficulty. Sometimes trying to imagine what I'd love to create is too big of a task, but saying, well, how would I love to feel right now? Oh, I would love to feel relief from this anxiety. I would love to feel more confident. I would love to feel okay, whatever it is. Even articulating those things then shifts me into a more positive frame of mind that says, well, I'm going to take a step in the direction of feeling okay. What do I need to, what's the smallest step I can do in that direction? Well, I can make my bed today. I can go make my bed. I can journal for a few minutes.
mm,
I can do those things. I can walk outside and take a good deep breath of air. I can drink a glass of water. Sometimes it's the basics. And I'm sharing this because sometimes when people are going through a really difficult time, Erica, all this talk of creativity, it can sound so like luxurious. That's optional. I mean, sure, it'd be nice if I weren't in such terror and such pain right now. That would be nice. And what I want to suggest to you is it doesn't have to be this big grand image. It can be something as small as what kind of moment do I want to create right now for myself? And if that means, well, I need to create a little bit of a greater sense of peace of mind, or I need to feel a little bit more well-being, great. Drink a glass of water and take a walk around the block and breathe a little bit. Now those things by themselves, just those tiny steps can bring a modicum, just a little bit more like of being okay in this moment. And that's what I'm talking about. Sometimes we put it way out there in the future, like, well, if I could write the book, or well, if I could create the business that would support me, or whatever it might be, the relationship. The fact is, we can start with what's within our own arm's reach, what's right here, right now, today. And I can do something about that. And even the smallest action inside of that sphere of influence will return the locus of control back where it belongs, which is within, and says, okay, okay, I might not be capable of much today, but I'm capable of this one thing. And this feels like a small spark of aliveness. So I'm going to pay attention to that. I'm going to make space for it. And to me, Erica, that means we're making our lives sacred. We're making this moment of my life sacred.
I love that you said that. Um, and my experience is also that we have to be less hard on ourselves. And on those days when you're feeling low, just
Yeah.
pick one thing, two things that you can do, and like be grateful and be thankful that you can actually do those things
Just
instead
that
of
one
the,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
And what I usually also do is that I sit down and go from moment to moment asking myself, what do I need now? What do I need?
Yeah.
Because changes
Yeah.
constantly. Like in one moment, I need, like you say, a glass of water, then I need something else, and just living moment by moment. And this is something Julia Cameron also describes in her book, like ask for guidance during
Mhm.
the day,
Mhm.
uh, hour by hour. You know, it doesn't have to be that big. Oh, I don't know what to do today. Okay, sit down and just ask, and you will be guided moment by moment. And I read actually in that the latest book of Julia Cameron, Living the Artist Way, that
Mhm.
she did an interview with you,
Mm.
and
Oh yeah.
yeah, and you said that you use guidance or prayer in your own life, and I'm curious to hear in what way you do. Do you do this by writing, or is it different in a different way?
Well, I did write a book, Blessed Are the Weird, so I am okay with being a bit offbeat about all this stuff, Erica.
I do it too,
Uh,
so that's okay.
well, no, I mean, so here's the thing. I grew up, in this fundamentalist Christian cult, and there was I had a lot of pain associated with the idea of prayer and God because I was a true believer as a child. And so letting go of that was its own version of a traumatic experience because it had formed a framework of how I saw the world, how I saw myself, all of that. Um, and so I would say it has taken me a long time to recover a version of prayer that doesn't feel like a religious act, or at least not a religious act like the ones I grew up with. I don't see God as a separate entity, a separate being out there to whom I must, like say words or give offerings in a certain way. I do see whatever we call God as the great force of life. I think Annie Lamott calls it Gus, great universal spirit. I really love that one.
That's cool.
At a
Yeah.
writing room, our founders call it the cosmic muffin, which I love. Yeah. No, but yeah, I would say that my experience of prayer actually shifted. Um, I began to experience moments of it with the morning pages with the Artist's Way. But years later, I'd been doing morning pages for years, Erica, and I read Janet Connor's book, Writing Down Your Soul. Writing Down Your Soul teaches this method of journaling, which is very similar to the morning pages, but creating a dialogue. And Janet said, "Well, we're going to start the day with address it, dear God." She said, "Now listen, a lot of people have trouble with the word God, so call it whatever you need to call it." So that you can begin to have a conversation. And she's like, this is not only for people who have some form of traditional religion or even form of spirituality. Like plenty of agnostics or atheists are using this process. And so I love that. I love that learning that we are in some form, we are creating dialogue with our inner self, with the collective unconscious, with our own psyches, whatever we need to call it, become comfortable with it. What I've discovered in that process, Erica, is an astonishing, an astonishing ability to ask questions and get answers, um, to put things out there for exploration, and to find myself being slowly guided in directions that are for my greater good, and are for the greater good of those around me. Um, I've become it's become such an integral part of my life that it's part of my everyday journaling, and it becomes more kind of like you said earlier, it becomes more of a sense of almost like breathing throughout the day. It's no longer this like I have to go to church on Sunday and say these words and then maybe I'll be okay, because I don't hold the notion of original sin at all anymore. I don't hold that we're broken, that we're born broken and need a savior. I don't hold that there's a separate God whom we must please or will be, punished for eternity or something like that. I don't hold that at all. I do hold that there's this enormously intelligent system of which we are part. And I think that our ego minds want us to believe that we are separate from it, but that is actual insanity. So that when I remembered that, I think it was Thich Nhat Hanh or one of those who said enlightenment for a wave is when it remembers that it is the ocean. And I love that. It's like a wave, if a wave could think of itself as something separate from the rest of the ocean, and then one day it remembered, oh, I'm made of the ocean. Like the ocean needs me and I need the ocean. Like there is no separation here. Because if
Mm.
you take a wave, you think of a wave on a beach, and if you took that wave and tried to pull it out of the ocean, what do you have if it's no longer part of the ocean? You just have a puddle, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a puddle. There's no power, there's nothing. It's just a puddle. And so the more that we realize we are part of this great ocean called life and aliveness, and the more that I use practices to remember that, that's what brings me back into a sense of greater peace, a sense of being connected to something that is vastly intelligent and that there is an order to it of some kind. Whether I can see it or not, there is an order to it. And I'm
Mm.
part of that. I'm part of this great cycle. And I'm such a tiny part of this great cycle
Mm.
that I often can't even see where I land in the cycle. So I need to use practices that remind me that I am made of this.
Mm. Yeah, and I also use this guidance or what do you want to call it? Like talk to my intuition by writing
Mhm.
quite often, every day almost. And usually I get like if I'm stressed or have a lot of fears or doubts, then I ask on the page like what should I do about this? And the answers I get are really calm and they're reassuring and they
Mm.
let me know that everything is okay, everything will be all right. You are okay. So
Mm.
it's like every time I contact this source or whatever you want to call it, that I like my fears, they're calming down a bit and I feel more calm after just 5 minutes of doing this guidance writing or writing down the soul or whatever you want to call it. You don't have to, doesn't have to be like half an hour, it can be only 5 minutes. It's my experience. Yeah.
I love that. And I think what you just said is really important, that it does not need to be this massive commitment of time,
Mm,
you know, just taking that 5 minutes. And it's the ego mind that says, when I said ego mind, Erica, I want to be clear that I don't mean that in some way like the ego is bad. I see the ego as much like our body. It's like we have this thing, this framework that is temporary, but it's not bad. It's not wrong. I think in the spiritual community, there's this sense, a lot of times there's a sense we need to get rid of the ego. I'm like, that's insanity. Like we need the ego is like having a body. We
mm,
need it. Right. But understanding that the ego was a fabricated self. So it's the self that our psyches create starting at a very young age to have something to navigate the world. And so there's this reflective, like, who am I in relation to other people? That's how we imitate others. That's how we learn to find out what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And so down through the course of our lives, we create this essentially, it's like a paper mache mask of all these layers. And it's not wrong to have one of those paper mache masks. We just have to remember that's not who we really are.
mm,
And so the ego mind has this need to keep us distinct from others and keep us distinct from life itself. And so by giving it periods of safety in a day of 5 minutes of breathing gently or meditating or journaling or taking a walk, we give it these periods and we remind it that it's safe to relax. It's like, it's okay to relax. It's okay to
mm,
not be guarded right now. It's okay to let ourselves melt into the experience of being part of everything, of being a wave in the ocean, made of the ocean. And so those practices, I think, bring us back into our true creative nature, which is powerful, which is fluid,
mm.
which always knows that it has enough. Yeah.
It's okay to just be because many of us are taught to be this kind of robot. Just we need to do, we need to prove something to be worth something. And when we're, just being, like Eckhart Tolle talks a lot about, just we are also human beings, human doings, but allowing the being part to be there more without feeling the pressure to be uh, or the that we're lazy. That's really valuable.
Right.
Yeah. So it's kind of, yeah, like you say, shifting that mindset from I'm okay. as a human being. I don't have to prove anything. I can just let life
Truly,
flow. So I'm
truly.
curious, last question. So we have all these kind of creative tools, you mentioned journaling, meditation, walks, different practices, artist dates, morning pages. Which one of those do you like? How is a typical creative day in your life, and which one of these practices do you use in your life?
Oh, I mean, all of them.
Yeah.
All for sure, all of them. I would say when I'm going through a lot of stress or something, if it all gets stripped down, the one that never goes away is the daily journaling. Like that is my lifeline. And that often leads me. In fact, I encourage people if they're developing a meditation practice, journal first. By journaling, we get it out of we get it out of swirling inside of our head and get it on paper, and often that opens the space where we even can meditate effectively. So for me, journaling is such a powerful process. That's probably the one. If I had only one I could choose, it would be that one. um,
Yeah.
no, I wouldn't ever want to let go of meditation, sitting meditation. Journaling can be so meditative though. And so I use it that way. I love yoga and walks, and I use the polyvagal chart a lot, looking at how we get up into flight or freeze, and how to settle down into that green zone, that ventral vagal state, where we're feeling peaceful and connected and resourceful and all of that, and our intuition is activated. And so yeah, all these practices to me are ways of getting into that peaceful state, and that's where all the good stuff happens.
Mm, yeah, I agree. For me, it's like I do different practices for in different like days or times. It's not like I
Hmm.
do 10 things every day, you know. I couldn't do
Sure.
anything else if
Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah.
it's more like pick and choose from day to day. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
I would say for me, journaling and a walk, if I can get a walk in, even if it's not 20 minutes, even if it's just five, to me that those two things end up being kind of non-negotiable in my day.
mm. And I have to ask you before we end this, what is your next book about? If you want to share.
Yeah, my next book, well, I hinted at it earlier. My next book covers discover, accept, and express as this framework for transformation. And
Mm.
so I intend to take that a step further than what the publisher allowed to happen with the Creative Cure. In between now and then, though, what led to that project is this book called Acorn. I'm not sure that that'll be the title, but it's almost like a kid's book. It's more like the Velveteen Rabbit or Jonathan Livingston Seagull. So it's a bit of a parable about this acorn that becomes a seedling. And if there's a wise old raven who plants the acorn originally, and then the wise old raven keeps coming back. Which, by the way, this raven is loosely connected to the the ravens that hang out with Odin in our Norse mythology.
Ah,
So
oh, Odin.
yeah,
Yeah,
there's
yeah, yeah,
some
yeah. Cool.
yeah, there's some connection there, which I love. And there's some connection to Yggdrasil as well, with this sort of the tree of life sense. But anyway, so there's all that sort of woven in there or hinted at. But that little story has become it'll that I intend to publish that first sometime in the next year or so. Been working with some illustrators on that. And then beyond that, though, is this larger, what feels like a larger book to go into the greater depth on what is transformation, and also bring in some of the neuroscience and nervous system science and trauma informed approaches and things like that.
Wow. Good luck with those projects, and I'm looking forward
Thank
to
you.
read both of them. So,
Well,
is there
thanks
anything
for
else?
inviting me. Yeah, I just appreciate this conversation. It's really great to connect with you, Eric, and with your people.
It's really great to have you on, and thank you for coming, and thank you for sharing this knowledge. And I will put all your links and books below when I publish this podcast so people can find you and follow your work. So, thank you so much, and good luck.
Thank you, and I'll make sure and share this with all the people who follow me too. I feel like you helped facilitate a really great conversation. So thank you, Erica.
Thank you so much.